1,200-word single paragraph. In the vast wind-swept plains of the Arizona Territory, where the horizon stretched like an endless promise and danger hid behind every whisper of dust, lived a poor rancher named Elias Ward, a man with little coin in his pocket but enough kindness in his heart to fill the whole frontier. His ranch was a patch of stubborn earth fenced with worn-out rails, a few cattle that never seemed to grow fat, and a small cabin he built with his own hands after losing everything in the winter fire 2 years back. Life wasn't generous to Elias, but he held tight to the belief that generosity toward others was what kept a man human in a ruthless land, and that belief was tested one blistering afternoon when he found an Apache woman collapsed near the dry creek bed behind his property, her wrist twisted, her breathing weak, her dress torn by thorns and travel. She looked at him with wild distrust, expecting a bullet rather than help because the world had taught her people never to trust settlers. Yet Elias knelt beside her without hesitation, offering water from his canteen, murmuring soft words as though calming a frightened horse. He carried her back to his cabin, tending to her wounds through the night, sharing the last of his food, staying awake by the dim orange glow of his oil lamp. She spoke little, only revealing her name, Nayeli, and that she had been separated from her band after an ambush by outlaws posing as soldiers. She expected to die alone in the desert, but Elias shook his head and said, "Not while I've got breath in me." Over the next 2 days, Nayeli slowly regained her strength while Elias tried to ease her fear, careful never to touch her without consent, speaking to her like one speaks to the storms, calmly, respectfully, knowing full well they could break loose without warning. Little by little she realized this man meant no harm. She watched him patch her clothes, make a sling for her arm, cook soup thicker than he could afford, and sleep outside on the porch just so she could feel safe in his bed. When she tried to repay him with beads from her necklace, he gently placed them back in her hand and said, "Kindness don't need paying, ma'am." What Elias didn't know, however, was that Nayeli wasn't just any Apache woman. She was the daughter of Chief Taza, leader of one of the most respected Apache bands in the territory. And when she disappeared, her people believed the worst. A search party of warriors roamed the desert for 3 days, reading the sand like a history book, tracking the faintest sign of her footsteps. But over those same 3 days, another rumor began to spread. Whispers of a white rancher seen carrying an injured Apache woman away on horseback. Whispers but twisted. Some said he was a kidnapper. Some said a hunter of bounties. Some said he was holding her hostage. By the time those stories reached the Apache scouts, the dawn sky was already turning red with trouble. And so, long before Elias or Nayeli realized the misunderstanding brewing across the desert, 1,000 Apache, warriors on horseback, leaders, elders, and trackers, rode under moonlight toward the little ranch by the creek. They moved silently like a tide of shadows over sand. At dawn's first glow, when Elias stepped outside to feed his last 3 cattle, the ground beneath him trembled like thunder trapped in the earth. He lifted his head, squinting into the rising sun, and his heart nearly stopped. Rows and rows of riders appeared on every ridge, encircling his ranch from all directions, men with painted faces, long braids, spears, rifles, and silent, unblinking eyes. 1,000 Apaches, 1,000 reasons to fear. Elias didn't reach for his gun. He knew that would be suicide. Instead, he slowly raised his hands, whispering to himself, "Lord help me." Nayeli stepped out of the cabin just moments later, still weak but alert enough to see the army gathering like a storm around them. For a long second, the world froze. Then she whispered something Elias didn't understand, but her voice trembled as though her heart had been pierced by relief and fear at once. "My people." Chief Taza stepped forward on a white stallion, his expression carved from stone, his eyes blazing with the terror of a father who feared he had lost his daughter forever. His warriors waited, hands near their weapons, ready to unleash their fury on the rancher, who they believed had taken her. Elias braced himself for death, standing between Nayeli and the Apache, refusing to let her fall into danger again, never realizing that the next words Nayeli would speak had the power to save him, or doom him, realizing that the next words Nayeli would speak had the power to save him, or doom him. 200-word single paragraph. The desert air felt like it stopped breathing as Nayeli stepped forward, leaning lightly on Elias for support. her injured arm wrapped in the very bandage he had placed with such care. She moved past him and onto the open dirt, raising her good hand toward the countless Apache eyes fixed on her. The entire army seemed to lean forward, waiting. For a moment she swayed, weak, exhausted, but then her voice rose strong and clear, speaking words in Apache that flowed like arrows through the morning light. Elias didn't understand a single syllable, but he knew she spoke of him. Chief Taza dismounted, his face shifting from fury to confusion to bewilderment as his daughter explained how this poor rancher, this solitary man with nothing but a worn cabin and a tired soul, had saved her life, carried her to shelter, fed her, guarded her, and slept outside like a loyal sentinel. She told them how he treated her wounds without expectation, how he looked at her not as an enemy nor as a burden, but as a human being worth saving. And as her words spread among the 1,000 gathered warriors, a wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind in tall grass. Elias remained perfectly still, sweat trailing down his back as he imagined the worst, because even kindness didn't always grant a man mercy in the West. But then Chief Taza approached, his steps firm yet uncertain, like a man confronting something he'd never faced before. He stopped only inches from Elias, staring deep into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception or cruelty. What he saw instead was the earnest exhaustion of a man who had given everything he could and expected nothing in return. Slowly, the chief placed his hand on Elias's shoulder, a gesture so rare that even his warriors stiffened in shock. "My daughter says you saved her," the chief said in rough English. "In our law, a deed like this does not go unanswered." Elias swallowed, trying to stay respectful. "Sir, I didn't do it for payment. I just couldn't leave her to die." The chief nodded. "That is why your deed is worth more." Then something incredible happened. Chief Taza raised his arm and shouted a command in Apache, and the 1,000 warriors dismounted at once, stamping the ground with a sound like thunder. Elias flinched, thinking it was the prelude to an attack. But instead, the warriors began laying gifts on the earth: blankets, tools, beads, carved bone, food, waterskins, medical herbs, even weapons of great craftsmanship, an offering, a tribute, a declaration of honor for the man who saved the chief's daughter. Elias could barely breathe as the mountain of gifts grew before him. More wealth than he had ever seen in his life, enough to rebuild his ranch 10 times over. Nayeli smiled softly at him, her eyes warm with gratitude. But the story was only beginning, because as the Apaches prepared to leave, a group of ridge, dusty, snarling, armed outlaws led by the very men who had ambushed Nayeli's band. They recognized her instantly and cursed their luck. "That's her," one shouted. "The bounty prize." The outlaws charged forward, firing wildly. In a heartbeat, the Apache warriors swarmed into formation like a living wall, shields rising, arrows notched, rifles cocked. Elias acted without thinking. He grabbed Nayeli's good arm and pulled her behind a water trough while bullets tore through the dust around them. The outlaws had no idea they had just ridden into a storm of 1,000 warriors whose rage burned hotter than any desert sun. In less than a minute, the battle was over. The outlaws lay scattered, their attack crushed under the weight of Apache fury. Elias rose from cover, helping Nayeli stand as Chief Taza approached him once more. "You fought for her again," the chief said quietly, "even against men of your own world." Elias shook his head. "Right and wrong ain't got worlds, Chief." For the first time, Taza smiled, a small, solemn expression only few ever witnessed. "You are a rare man, Elias Ward, and our people honor rare men." He then made a vow that stunned everyone present. "From this day, no Apache shall raise weapon against this ranch or the man who owns it. Your land is protected. Your home is sacred. If ever you call, 1,000 will answer." Elias felt tears sting his eyes, the weight of such a promise heavier than any treasure. Nayeli placed her hand gently over his, whispering, "Your kindness saved me. Now it has saved you." And as the Apache army rode away under the rising sun, their silhouettes sweeping across the desert in a breathtaking wave, Elias understood something he never had before. Kindness doesn't just echo. It returns multiplied. He looked at the horizon, the gifts at his feet, the peace in his chest, and whispered to himself, "Maybe I ain't as poor as I thought." And from that dawn on, the rancher who once believed he had nothing became the man who held the respect of a nation.